Hi, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins, and welcome to Financial Lovemaking, where we talk about love, life, money, and everything in between. I'm here with my buddy, my partner, and my co-host, Miss S. Tia Brown, the entertainment director at Ebony Magazine. How you doing today, Tia?
I'm doing well. I can't say the same for the people that we're talking about in today's topic.
I know the baby mama thing. What is up with what's going on?
I,
What is happening here? How many? Okay, so Iyanla Vanzant interviews. What was it? Six
6 men,
men with how many mamas?
87 kids, 50 baby mamas.
Okay, got my calculator here. That's
Please
so
average it
50.
out.
That's about 8.3 babies mamas per man. So that's just that. First of all, that's nasty, right? Because that's a lot of unprotected sex, right?
Mm.
And that's part of the conversation I think that has to be thrown on the table. STD epidemics do not announce themselves. They attack you. They attack people in private because they see the little results and they fold them up and they don't tell anybody. And so nobody really knows when viruses and bacteria and everything is being passed around. And the other thing is that we know that it takes many tries typically to fertilize a woman's egg or to have sex at the time of ovulation, right? So to me, what I'm thinking here, just as a mathematician, is it takes a lot of tries of unprotected sex to get somebody pregnant
Well,
typically.
we know that's not always the case. Sometimes it's a one and done.
Yeah,
You know,
sometimes, but
and I
if you
think
look at statistical
right. No,
averages, it takes several
these men
times to try to
are
impregnate a
above
woman.
average in many ways. Unfortunately, many of them are not good. But you focus on the number of baby mamas. I did the math just now on how many kids, 14 and a half kids, obviously it's not a clear number, on average per father. So each of these guys has, let's say, 14 lives that they're responsible for guiding emotionally, physically being able to have interaction with them, financially being able to offer support. It's virtually impossible. And to me, that's the saddest part about this. I think Iyanla did a tremendous job in getting these guys together and really talking about the behavior and the emotional backstory behind the bad choices, and also having the women speak about the how the lack of accountability and co-parenting support has impacted them. But who I feel most sorry for are the kids, because you have mommy who made a very bad decision in deciding to have a child with someone who was reckless in their procreation, and daddy who is so depressed consistently. And I'll say both of them are depressed. I don't want to make it seem like I'm pitying the man more than the woman, who's constantly creating kids and moving on.
Well,
So
well,
who's here to help you be your best self?
well.
Nobody.
Right. I agree with you. I know one person who had 14 kids, and he wasn't able to keep up with all of them.
Were they in the same household? Because there is
No,
also a difference
no,
between
right in the same.
making a conscious decision to have 14 children with a wife, or maybe even two wives, and you are able to go, between an ex-wife and a current wife, and being a responsible parent. My issue is not with the number of children if you can take care of them, It's more so if you decided that you're going to be irresponsible and just dropping your seed everywhere and leave it to the world to be responsible. And this is not even just a financial thing. This is not about welfare, which we all contribute to. This is about the emotional well-being of a child. How do you create a human who has great self-esteem and is able to maximize whatever their purpose is?
You really can. I mean,
All right.
with 14, 15 kids spread out in several different households, you just don't have the time to really engage in that kind of full time parenting that is necessary to raise a healthy adult.
Sad.
If you have one, two, or three kids, that is a full time job. I mean, that's gonna eat up pretty much everything that you have to offer in terms of time and emotional energy. If you are spread up out amongst, say, 14 kids in, say, seven different households, first of all, you're going to have a whole lot of money because the child support courts are going to eat you up.
All right.
You're broke for life, and that right there says to me, if you are a woman and you meet that handsome guy that's got all the kids, you got to understand what that means. He's going to be taking a piece of your money. Number one, he's not going to usually have any money. Number two,
Right.
and then you've got all this emotional chaos. Number three, and then you also got these entangled spirits from all these other women with whom he has these long-term relationships with, many of whom he may still be sleeping with. So effectively, you're going to end up. I mean, what in the world could you expect to come out of a relationship like that? Which clearly goes back to what you were saying. Depression, low self-esteem, clearly play a role in the actions of everybody involved, right?
Absolutely. And when we talk about the financial piece, it's not that I don't think money is important, but I do want to make it clear that it's not the biggest thing, because you might have a father who makes $40,000 and he's not able to give his child the world, or even children in one or two households everything, but he's able to participate actively in their lives. But we're talking about other logistics that mean as much, if not more, than money. You cannot spend quality time with children when they're in five, six, seven different households. You cannot make sure that emotionally they're getting the support that they need in terms of day to day interactions, because you can't co parent with five or six different women. So you've essentially made the decision that every child you have is on their own.
Hmm. And really, when you talk about uh, life, you talk about winning the game of life. You can almost compare it to trying to win a championship in basketball or whatever. If you're trying to win a championship in basketball, you don't just go out there and play and hope for the best and just do whatever you feel like doing. It's not going to work.
Right.
A good life does not happen by accident. You have to plan. You have to have some degree of discipline. And so, what I would say to men is you have to think about where you're planting your seed, and not just where you're planting your seed, but just who you're laying down with, in the first place. Because I've seen so many guys that will come and complain to me, and my baby mama do this and she won't do that, and she's this, she's that, and when you do the backpedaling, sometimes you'll find out that this guy maybe barely knew this woman when they decided to sleep
Right.
together. And I said, well, you do realize that babies come from sex, right?
And I think you have different types of situations when this arises. I think you have the people who make the decision very casually, and that's an emotional issue. But you also have the people who don't want to lose the emotional attachment that they have with this person. So having a baby is a kind of like what you said earlier, a way to keep going back and forth. And it's not always just for sex. And when we look at the emotional issues going on for both parties, the man and the woman, it's about feeling like you have someone that's on your team, and being able to engage in healthy adult relationships that have closure and healthy patterns. And I think that's another major reason that people continue to have children in this kind of unplanned, unstructured way, because it's I love him, I love her, I want to be with her, I don't know how. Instead of either working on the relationship or moving forward, it's kind of like this is a piece of me here, a piece of me there. So both parties have to be extremely responsible for it, for their behavior. I think that overall we want to focus on the kids, for me, because they're minors and they didn't have a choice. But we have three victims in this situation. We have both adults who were not nurtured or pulled up maladaptive coping skills. And then you have the child who is kind of in this situation where they're going to inherit learned behavior that's unhealthy. So my parting words are, everybody needs to be mindful of their choices when they're lonely, when they're hurt, when they're broken. If you feel that you don't have the love and support that you need, having a family with someone doesn't mean having a baby.
Well,
And that's the big thing. A lot of times you think, oh, if I have a child, we are instantly connected, and you are. But it doesn't mean it's going to be a healthy, productive relationship that's going to help you move to the next level.
well, my argument is more fundamental. I think about this more as a parent than anything.
Right.
Um, the first thing I will say is you have to really think about. I saw the guy. He was sitting there talking to Ayana, and Jeff
Iyanla.
Iyanla, sorry, and Jeff Johnson, who I love this guy. He's a good friend of mine. He was standing behind Iyanla and had his hand on his shoulder, and she's got her hands on the guy's chest, and she's giving him this passionate plea. You saw the clip, right? And he's breaking down, and he interrupts her a little bit. Remember that it's very subtle. He said, "Well, what about the women I wasn't in relationships with?" And she's like, "It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter." And she goes forward, but here's the thing: That's an interesting point, because we have to really question this idea of giving your body to somebody that you're not at least in a committed relationship with. Because when you lay down with somebody, there is a possibility that a baby is going to come out of that, and you need that child to be born in a cradle of love, not in the middle of somebody's drunken one night stand. And I
Right.
think
That goes
that
back to
I,
depression and poor decision making because of how you're feeling about yourself.
there you
Because
go.
like you said earlier, it's not just about even making a baby. It's about the potential of having an STD ruin your life or ruin someone else's life. So when you're constantly engaging in this irresponsible activity, there's something bigger going on. And I think Iyanla really touched the surface on starting to have these conversations, but it's important that they continue.
Well, I think it's important that they can continue, and I think also, we have to deal with the fact that we live in a world where we've decided as a society that it's every individual's right to have sex with who they want, to have kids whenever they want, to do whatever they want. And the concern about that on the flip side is that there are people who will take advantage of that freedom to do what they want, but yet put the burden of the responsibility for their choices on society,
And I
right?
know
When
this was going
and
to go
and
there.
and I take that personally, because I've raised several kids whose fathers were not there for whatever reason. They were either off doing something else, or created situations where it was impossible for them to be the fathers that they needed to be. And so, on behalf of the good parents out here who care about all these kids, these 87 kids that they made who don't have a father and maybe don't even have a mother, who knows? On behalf of those people, I say that there's a reason to say, look, we're going to be compassionate to a point, but there's also going to be a point where we're going to confront you. If you're my uncle, my cousin Willie, and you're just making babies like there's no tomorrow and not taking care of your kids, I'm gonna get in your face and let you know, look, you're not a man right now, because the way you're behaving is irresponsible. You're destroying people's lives. You're asking other people to foot the bill, and I'm not taking that shit anymore. Excuse my French.
Yeah, and I
So.
think accountability in the community is extremely important. There was a time when certain behaviors just didn't happen because you were shamed.
Hmm.
And I'm not a person for being disrespectful to others, but I do think that there's something to be said for having that conversation and letting people know that the community cares, your family cares. We expect great things from you. We expect good things for you and from you. So we do need to start having those conversations in our personal environment. So it's not like I'm encouraging to go up to a stranger and say, blah, 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 you should be doing this. But definitely when you see someone in your family, becoming of the age where they can be sexually active or engaging in behavior that is inappropriate, have a conversation. Do it in private. This is not a situation where you want to embarrass them, but you really want them to know that there are other choices that will have a better ending and outcome for all parties involved.
Well, and the last thing I'll say, and this is the last thing I promise, this is something I have to share, that I see these, I watch these little lectures on the internet about human behavior, psychology, biology, astrophysics, all kinds of crap. And one interesting piece of information I picked up from a Stanford professor. I was watching his lecture the other day, and I don't know if you know this or not, Tia, but and I explained this to my daughters as a precaution to help them understand the power of sex, the power of love, and what that does to a person's brain. And it affects a woman's brain differently from a man's. And what they found was, when they did brain scans to look at what happens to the human brain in the process of having an orgasm, they found that for men, the dopamine levels shoot up, similar to women, because it just feels so good. Dopamine makes you feel good. For men, certain parts of their brain would shut down, other parts of their brain would still be operating. They said for women, this was a neutral psychologist saying this. He said, for women, their entire brain shuts off, except for the part of the brain where the orgasm is occurring. And also, their oxytocin levels spike up to 500%, which leads them to naturally feel attached and connected to the person they were sleeping with. And we've talked about that before. And so when I explained this to my daughter, I said, you have to understand the power of love and sex. It is one of the most powerful forces in the universe, and it cannot be taken lightly. A man that you don't like that much, that you don't know that well, has no business being inside your bedroom or inside your body. And I just kept it real. I said, if you got to get a vibrator, get one. Whatever you got to do, handle that so that you don't let these creeps come up in your house and ruin your life. And I think these conversations, these very real conversations, have to
Right.
be had so young people can understand what happens when you're out here just making babies like there's no tomorrow. That's it. I'm done. I have nothing else to
Okay,
say.
okay, okay, Daddy. It's done. It's done. Voice just did his daddy,
Yes.
his daddy dialogue, and we'd
Yes.
love to hear what you guys have to say about this topic. 6 men, 50 women, 87 kids. How do we create change?
All
Thank you so
right.
much for listening and have a great day.
Bye bye.